Alright everyone, so you've hopefully now got your heads round the basics of supply and demand. What we now need to move on to is what makes a supply curve shift and what makes a demand curve shift. So what we're going to focus on first of all is demand. Okay, so again I'll draw my axes for price and for quantity. I'll draw my demand line on, my supply line on, and just as importantly, I'll label my equilibrium point. Okay, now if demand was to shift out to the right from D to D1, this would lead to an increase in demand. So what you can see is as people demand more of the product, the price will increase to P2 as people start to demand more of the product. Clearly, as price increases, businesses will start to extend their supply as price grows due to the more potential to make profit. If we go back to assuming that demand and supply meet, creating equilibrium at P1, Q1, if demand was to move to the left, so from D to D2, demand has decreased. As people start to demand less of a product, the equilibrium price falls, and as price falls, businesses are willing and able to supply less, so we have a contraction in supply. Now, I want to talk very quickly about what can lead to these changes. What you should be thinking about are ability to pay, tastes, and what happens with substitutes and complements. So let's think about these then in turn. Ability to pay. If your income was to increase, then you might be more willing and able to buy certain products. So me, for example, if I was to receive a pay rise, my demand for foreign holidays would shift from D to D1. I'm willing and able to buy more of that particular product simply because I can afford it. That's what we call a normal good. As people earn more money, ability to pay increases, they buy more of the product. However, what we also have here are inferior goods. Let's assume I'm at this equilibrium point here. If my ability to pay increased, maybe my demand for some goods and services might fall to this equilibrium point. Let's take an example. At the moment, money's quite tight. I might go on camping holidays. For me, this might be an inferior good. As my income increases, I might start to demand less camping holidays and have more exotic holidays abroad. Okay. Other links to ability to pay. If the tax I pay the government wants to reduce, that would increase my disposable income, which again will lead to my demand increasing for a product. Let's move on to the second one, tastes. Okay, simply tastes, how much you want a particular product. Taste can change for all sorts of different reasons. Think about why businesses spend millions of pounds every year on marketing, branding their products. If a company, for example, can get a celebrity to endorse their products, as brand image increases, demand for their product should increase. Okay, so David Beckham sponsors all sorts of different products. Paid a fortune by many different companies. That's done because businesses think if he endorses their products, more people will want to buy it. Clearly, if taste for a product fall, demand will decrease. So one example I can give you here is that in recent years, there's been a lot of bad publicity for fast food outlets such as McDonald's. People were more aware of the problems that junk food creates on them. This led taste away from McDonald's and demand for the product started to fall. Let's think about substitutes and complements then. Substitutes, well, clearly when you can swap one product for another, so examples being You can have a PS3 or an Xbox 360. One can be swapped for the other. For some people, they can drive to work or they can go on the bus. They are substitute products. Okay. If I go on holiday to Spain next year, a holiday in Greece would be a substitute product. One I can swap for the other. For you guys, you might have had a choice between coming to Huddersfield New College, or it could have been going to Greenhead College. So let's take an example then. Let's imagine we're at this equilibrium point here, P1, Q1. If a substitute product was to become more expensive, more people will shift towards this product, which means demand would increase for this particular product. So an example being if somebody viewed Coke and Pepsi as two substitute products, if Pepsi increased their price, demand for Coke would increase to D1. Just thinking about that in another way though as well, let's imagine that we're looking at the market for Coke being at P1, Q1. If the brand image of Pepsi was to increase, or the price of Pepsi was to decrease, people would shift away from Coke towards Pepsi. Demand for Coke would fall to this new lower level here. Let's take one more example before we move on. People going on holiday in Europe, they've got three main possibilities, but let's focus on two forms of transport to get there. We could either fly, or we can go by Eurostar. So let's imagine someone's planning a holiday in Paris. If they originally chose to fly, demand for flights at P1, Q1. If Eurostar was to get a bad reputation, or to increase their prices, more people would shift away from Eurostar to buy more aeroplane flights. Let's focus on the last reason why demand might shift, complements. We're looking here at goods that have to be used in conjunction with each other. They have to be used together. So for example, if you buy a car, you need petrol to run it. If you buy an Xbox 360, you want a game to go with it. So let's imagine we've got a scenario where the demand for Xbox 360 is at P1, Q1. If there was suddenly a whole host of new games released for this console that people wanted to buy them games, more people must buy the console, which means demand increases to D1. On the other hand, if the Xbox 360 equilibrium again is at P1, Q1, if the games were suddenly increase in price, less people want the games, less people demand the console, so demand falls to D2. Right, okay, so we've got demand there. Let's focus on supply. Again, I've got my equilibrium point where demand is equal to supply. Before I move on, I must label that. There were marks for that in the exam, labelling these. If supply went to S1, we have an increase in supply. Quantity increases to Q2, and the supply increases, price falls to P2. If supply was to move to the left, so S to S2, this time we have a decrease in supply. Quantity falls to Q3, which forces price up to P3. Okay, now what I want to bring in here now is the reasons why supply curves can shift. And you've got to remember one simple thing. Business costs. If we're at S and we move to S1, business costs will be falling. It's cheaper to make something, therefore more businesses are willing and able to provide more of the product at a cheaper price. If supply moved from S to S2, business costs have increased. As costs increase, the potential to make profit falls. Less business supply, price will have to increase. Let's take some examples of this. If the minimum wage was to reduce, it will mean that business labour costs will fall, which means that overall cost of production fall, supply will increase. Other costs falling which could lead to supply increasing. Reduction in tax rates on businesses. It could be a reduction in raw material costs, fuel costs, heating costs. It could even be an increase in government subsidies, where the government physically gives a business more money to cover some of their costs to encourage greater production of the product. Clearly, supply falling. S2, S2 is business costs increasing. So that could be minimum wage rates increasing. It could be an increase in taxes on business, a reduction in subsidies, increase in raw material costs. It could be an increase in other costs such as heating costs, fuel costs, rent, interest on loan repayments. All these different factors will lead to supply decreasing. So what you've got there is an overview of demand and supply and what makes both curves shift.